So before I talk about this next one, I have to say I had a local blogger guy who actually dinged me a couple weeks ago on Twitter. I had said something about one of our wines that when it first came out, I just wasn't really into it. But it started to come around, and he said, "Oh, so there is a winemaker that's admitting that he has favorites," and there is absolutely, and I like to believe I love all of my children, all of our babies here, these wines, but there are sometimes where I just shake my head. Now, that said, going through the lineup of what we just tasted, it's clearly not within this lineup of what was in the most recent package, because they're all single vineyard wines. The bin 7 is also a single block wine. It's a micro block from inside of a single vineyard. The reason why I came with that intro is this fourth wine we're trying, the Nevaeh 2008. Strangely, after I just waxed on poetic about the last four wines, this is my favorite of this lot. Well, at least it is now. It's got an extra year of maturity on it. The other wines simply haven't even been released to anyone but the Vine Club yet, whereas this is actually now sold out. There's just the last few bottles of this went to our Vine Club, the Single Vineyard Wine Club, or the Reds only. So if you want to check that out, the 2008 Nevaeh Red. So this is the first bottling that we did it's called Single Vineyard Nevaeh. However, I should say that prior to this, our meritage was always the Nevaeh bottling. It always did come only from estate-grown fruit. So we have actually been making this wine for a long time. It was just called Meritage as opposed to Nevaeh. We've pulled away from really expressing ourselves based on the variety, and that's what Meritage is. Meritage is a blend of the words merit and heritage. It's the merit of the grape varieties traditionally grown in Bordeaux, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. Or for white, Sauvignon Blanc, Semillon Muscadel, and the heritage of blending for that more complete and more complex style of wine. So we still go with that same philosophy, but it's not about trying to create the perfect claret as it is to create the perfect Nevaeh. The other thing is that in coming vintages after this, 2008 is the last one that does not have any Syrah in it. Moving forward, Syrah has really just been shining in our vineyard. It's not allowed in Meritage bottlings because it's not a classic Bordeaux variety, but like most of our rebellious ways, we aren't going to be bound by rules. We're going to be told, we're not going to be told that you can't make a better wine because this particular variety isn't allowed in there. We're going to make the best wine possible, and sometimes it means just going against the normal grain of what the wines are like. So a little bit about this Nevaeh. 2008 was probably the most classic of Virginian vintages, if there is such a thing. Since I've been here, I have a hard time believing that there is a classic Virginia vintage, because 2007, 2010 were very hot, dry, big exotic style wines. 2009 was very cool, but still dry, had this good freshness to it. 2011, we had all sorts of rain at harvest with a tropical storm and a hurricane, so it's creating much leaner, lighter styles of wines. But 2008 was this kind of like in between. We had some hotter days, we had some cooler nights, there was a little bit of rain in July, we had a rain at the start of harvest, then it kind of dried out, and then we had rain at the end of harvest. It ended at kind of the normal time, it was around October 15th. As a vintage, it was average. For me, it was pretty cool because I came from Canada where the cooler type of years is what I was used to. So this also worked for me. It gave me a little bit of a jump forward as to what I thought we could be doing. But Nevaeh, it all comes from, in general, this particular one does for sure, it all comes from our hill block. Our hill block is the same spot as where the Chardonnay came from in our Nevaeh white. It's as you come up from the Potomac River, we go up about 300 feet and then we come back down the opposite direction, which is south facing. And then there's that ridge in the middle that has the Chardonnay, which has a little bit of north on it because it's a bump. But overall, it's a south-facing slope. It's also our oldest vines. Some of them were planted from anywhere between 87 and 89 is when the hill was planted, with the exception of the hybrids that we've now pulled out and replanted with Viognier, Syrah, Petit Manseng. Those were planted last year. We won't get fruit from those for a couple of years. So stuff coming off here. The Merlot in particular, which is 71% of this, was planted in 1988. It's just starting to come into its own. It's starting to get that wisdom and calm down, not try to overproduce, not try to be over vigorous. The beauty of these vines as well is a lot of these vines were planted prior to when we had any irrigation capabilities in our vineyard. So the roots have dug down a little bit deeper, and they're starting to bring up some of that minerality and some of the great nutrients from the subsoils, and that's really where you start to get terroir come through. We've since stopped irrigating our entire vineyard for the same reason, as we want our vines to keep digging and get into that dirt. And so that's one of the good advantages to the hill block, as well as that south-facing slope. And then because of that wind, it's just kind of this perfect storm where we get good acidity and freshness maintained from the cooler nights as the wind brings in the cooler air. That south-facing slope means we get a lot of sunlight all day long, both morning and afternoon sun. And then those deeper roots and more smart vines, older, full of wisdom, just giving a lot of character to these wines. So this one, it's 71% Merlot, 23% Cabernet Sauvignon, and 6% Cabernet Franc. So definitely more classic in the ways of what we have been doing as blends. The past few years in this wine is, very Merlot dependent, because Merlot, it's a mid-season ripener. It can ripen very well every single year. I find that the Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, they're good for helping to add some complexity and seasoning and really give those little added tweaks to showcase the terroir. But Merlot is generally the backbone. So it spent 18 months, again, all new Virginia oak, indigenous yeast fermentations. The other thing I haven't mentioned is we are all about extraction with the reds. I mean, we tend to let the grapes be on the skins for a long, long time. The shortest is generally around 21 days, with the exception of this past vintage. We were pulling things off at 10 days because we didn't want that much extraction. We wanted more elegance because it was a lighter year. But when the skins are really ripe, and that's what we go for, 21 days up to, we've had 35 and 40 day macerations within our red programs as well. And, we use pulse air, which is just bubbles to move the cap as opposed to pumping. So it's very, very gentle, just trying to get that very good extraction, but not beat it up. It's just kind of a fun thing. I mean, we harvest our grapes based on how they taste, how the flavor is, how the tannins feel, how the seeds look and taste, as opposed to looking at numbers. I mean, sugar's going to tell me how much alcohol there is. It's not going to tell me anything about the flavor of the wine or the structure of the wine or anything that's going on. Acidity, it is very important. pH, all that kind of stuff, it's important. You're going to hear all those things all over the place. But I don't think that those are true indicators, particularly here, as to what those grapes are going to taste like or what that wine's going to taste like. It's going to tell you one aspect. So we're all about that artisanal way. Taste it, feel it, understand those grapes, as opposed to looking at numbers. So this, we fermented it. It was fairly hot fermentation after a long cold soak. Trying to get that extraction as well and get that depth, get a little bit of mouthfeel to it, and then the 18 months in all new Virginia oak, then bottled and fine unfiltered. So let's take a sniff. So this is just, it's starting to come around as a wine. It's not just about its fresh, young exuberance of a wine anymore. the others, they're all delicious, but they are still very, very fresh. They're very young. They're very primary. This is now starting to just get a little bit of something else to it. Some of the fruit is starting to stew. It's starting to create a better balance and integration between the oak and the fruit. It's all marrying well. I'm by no means saying that it's at its peak maturity. It still has a few years behind it, absolutely. I'm going to guess that this wine's going to be its best in around 2015, 2016, but I'm guessing age, that's based on what you like to drink. If you like something that's bigger and bolder and fresher and more firm tans and things like that, don't age a wine. Drink it. You're going to like it better young anyway. So, but I'm getting some coffee notes as well as some red and